if a stranger had walked into this room, a stranger from outside Trinidad and Tobago, and would have listened to these introductions, they could not have helped but come to the conclusion that the people gathered in this room are the people who run Trinidad and Tobago. I know it is widely felt that it is the government that runs the country, and government there means members of the cabinet, but that might be so from the standpoint of the executive. But the authority of the executive has been delegated into a huge state enterprise sector. If one does not understand the size and the role and the cost of the sector that you outside of the cabinet represent, then you don't understand the economy of Trinidad and Tobago. You don't understand the decision-making process. But we're trying to understand it and to ensure that we are all on the same page. I want to begin by thanking all of you who have agreed to serve in your respective capacities. Because honestly, if I was asked to serve on a board now, I would think twice. Not that I have regrets for having spent so much of my life in public service. But if I had to do it now, because of the potential stresses involved and the manifest ingratitude in your face, I might just say I couldn't be bothered. So those of you who've agreed to take on the responsibility to run some agencies, I want to thank you on behalf of the cabinet and the country, because I know what you're doing for us. And I know that many of you might have done so against the advice of your friends and your family, and that makes it even more important that you have agreed as citizens to take responsibility. And we recognize that responsibility which you have. Because every single area is important. There's no unimportant area in the government. You know, there's a poem that says, for the want of a nail, the shoe was lost, and for the want of a shoe, a horse was lost, and for the want of a horse, the battle was lost, and for the want of a battle won, the war was lost. It all started with a nail. I watched a government in Trinidad and Tobago battered into submission by certain developments, largely either in the cabinet, unfortunately, or in the state enterprise sector. If you go back and look at what happened to us in the last 5 years, I would say 75% of the negatives that came to the government of the day came from the state enterprise sector. How the cabinet handled it is another story. But we believe that the cabinet and persons who are in your position as executors of the government policy and management of certain aspects of the public purse, that we should have a clearer understanding of where we are and all be on the same page. What the room now represents in terms of who is in here is a pool, a diverse pool of the best talent available who have offered themselves to serve in Trinidad and Tobago. And therefore, we should reasonably expect a positive outcome. But you are serving at a time of great challenges and difficulty. And therefore, the job that you are doing as heads of those organizations that you head are very, very crucial to the government's survival, to the government's program success, and to the country's success. And therefore, I want to say to you that you really need to pay attention to what is happening at the central government level. particularly the Minister of Finance, and probably after that, the Minister of the Attorney General if you're doing things wrong. But the Prime Minister speaks for the Cabinet, and policy is espoused from the Cabinet. So your minister is a key person in all of this. Boards report to a minister. And I make this point because in my history, my experience, I've had a situation where it came to a point where a board known to me was of the view that it could function without the minister because it might have found another place to function. And the end result of that was disaster. So objective number one as chairman is that you are working with a minister who is reporting to a cabinet led by the Prime Minister. Any other route is asking for disaster. It's teamwork. Prime Minister is head of the team, reporting to the cabinet. Cabinet has ultimate responsibility. And each minister has a portfolio with responsibility. And whether the minister is a big man, a small boy, a fat man with a foolishness on top of his head, is the minister. But the bottom line is that we all, the executive and the publics and the state enterprises, we all operate through an engine called the public service. The same way you are now chairing boards and other agencies at a time of serious economic downturn and challenges associated with it, you are also being asked to serve at a time when the public service is at its weakest. And there are serious dangers involved in that. Because serious mistakes can be made, and when the mistakes are made, there are legal liabilities and other kinds of liabilities, including political. And why is it so? What has happened in recent times is that the quality of the public service at the top, permanent secretaries level, has not been what it used to be. We no longer have the Eugenio Moore and the Frank Rampersad and the Frank Bassotti and the Joyce Alcantaras and the John Andrews. We don't have those people at all in the public service. In the not too distant past, a lot of experienced public servants retired at the same time. And there was no conscious succession planning in the public service. What had been opted for was replacement by inbreeding. So people moved up into the vacuum by virtue of the fact that there was a space there. And then a lot of people left at the same time. So by the time we got into office, the public service was decimated of people who really measured up to what we had been accustomed to as public servants at the PS and deputy PS level. And I tell you worse, by the end of this year, a significant portion of those who are there are due to go. And therefore, those of you who are new, many of you are new, like some new ministers, you don't have the support of the public service to guide you. And that's a potential pitfall. We have had situations where the Minister of Finance has taken a position, speaking for the cabinet and for his portfolio, and made a public statement on a particular matter. And we're all happy that the thing is working. And then we find out after that an agency has done something completely opposite to what the Minister of Finance has said. $400 million worth. Or we have a situation where a minister is saying that, listen, like the cabinet is saying, like the Prime Minister is saying, We are trying to dampen expenditure because the country has to bring down the expenditure. We are not in a position revenue-wise to spend at the level of the stated budget expenditure-wise. But then somebody in a state enterprise could say, that don't apply to me. What applies to me is that I want to do what I want to do, and therefore expenditure reduction is not for me. On the other hand, while we are trying to dampen expenditure, we're not trying to kill the economy. So we are required, especially in the state enterprise sector, because the state enterprise sector is such a huge chunk of the national economic effort. And the bulk of the development program of one kind or another is done through the state enterprise sector statutory bodies. And when I say we're trying to dampen down expenditure, we're not trying to kill the economy. So if you have money to pay bills and the bills are due for payment, then today I want to say to you, pay all the bills that you are able to pay. The reason why this meeting is taking place now and not before, had I said that to you in January, I would have been going away from here very afraid that you might have gone and done some things that could make us broke by April or August. But it is now July. Tomorrow morning is July. And there's only one quarter left in the year. So now we can more confidently spend what we have in hand in particular. So by September 30th, the development program or the bills to be paid for 2016 should be paid. So we want that money to move into the economy now and begin to have an effect on the economy. You pay those bills, and those people pay their bills, and they spend that money on some more economic activity, because once money is on the move, it's not all talk that changes the economy. It's the dollar moving from hand to hand to hand. What we have done, I should say quite successfully, is to have slowed the movement of the money for a while, which will eventually have the effect of dampening the overall expenditure by September 30th. But we don't want the pendulum to swing so far in one direction that we overdo it. So when you leave here today, Chairman, go back to your agencies, sit down with your chief financial officers, find out who you owe, find out how much money you have that you could pay bills, and if you can't pay all the bills, then pay some. And if you have some people to pay, don't pay one person all the money and don't pay the others any. Pay all of them some of it. You owe 40 million, you only have 20 million, give somebody 5 million, and if they owed 10 million, you give them 2 million or 3 million at least, give them something, because they have staff to pay, and they have people, creditors to pay as well. So we want you not to be in a position in September to have money in hand which rightfully should have been spent in this fiscal year. And that should see us giving the economy a bit of a tweak. We're putting some money into the economy. A lot of contractors are complaining that they haven't been paid. And of course, a lot of what you have done, what central government has done, is done through contracting. If the contractors are not paid, and I don't mean paid in full, I mean given some kind of a flow in response for work done, then that's the knock-on effect of that is that we are not going to get the new work done, and we're not going to get the economic benefit of what they would have done with that money. And the last thing we want is for us to owe contractors and have some money in hand that we could have paid, and they, instead of not being paid, they lay off workers. Because the objective in this period of downturn, in this period of reduced revenue, in this period of adjustment, our objective is to retain the employment of as many people as possible. Because the objective at the end of the day is the quality of life of citizens. And quality of life starts with having a job, having an income. So if people are losing jobs, we know immediately that there is a reduction in the quality of life in that household. And think about it in that way, that if you put $2 million out there, a lot of that $2 million will go to somebody else. and eventually it gets right down to the lady who is selling the juice on the roadside. And I know that we have a development program. I also know that the public sector investment program has not performed at the level at which the Parliament has approved it, because Parliament approves a wish list. $7 billion of development program, assuming that you will have $7 billion to spend. Well, we don't have $7 billion, but whatever we have, I want us to spend it effectively during this period. And talking about policy, some very bad habits have developed in recent times in this country. Very bad habits. And one of those habits was the cabinet directing wrongdoing. I want to give you the assurance, members of boards, chairmen of boards, that under my stewardship, this cabinet will not be directing any wrongdoing in this country. And secondly, with respect to value for money, there seems to have been an attitude in the recent past that value for money didn't matter. It's just how much you could extract, how much juice you could squeeze out from the orange. Even if we wanted to, we can't afford to behave like that. The monies you are going to spend, you as leaders of your various organizations need to ensure that the public is getting value for money. Make sure that there are systems in place which cannot be easily abused by the well-heeled and the knowledgeable. Because I tell you something else too. Because bad behavior has been so tolerated, there are bad behavior experts in the system, and they know exactly how to work the system to get what they want out of it, regardless of who is in office. It is your job as new chairmen and ladies to ensure that you don't have in your system, in your agency, systems that foster success for that kind of approach. Many of you will be in areas where there are unanswered questions. You may find yourselves having to do an audit. An audit is not aimed at any particular individual, hopefully, to persecute or prosecute anybody. It is to ensure that the engine is functioning the way it should function, and the oil is going where it's supposed to go, and the vehicle is being driven how it should be driven. And all of you, wherever you are, keep your eyes on an auditable situation. Either that if an audit is conducted, it will show that things are going well, or if some things are not going right, it will identify them. And insofar as the bogey of corruption is involved, I want to give you the assurance that this government is running a zero tolerance on corruption wherever it might rear its head. Because corruption is an individual action, starts with individual action, and participants are responsible for their individual conduct. And if anyone or group of people are identified in corrupt practice, then it is the policy of this government that every tub must sit on its own bottom. And I want you to understand that very clearly. And as chairman of agencies, I'm not asking you to go out and persecute anybody and carry out any witch hunt. I'm asking you to be diligent to make sure that your agency is not a place where corruption resides unattended. But if you suspect that things are wrong, then you're going to find out what is wrong, and the requisite action will be taken. And you have the fullest support of the government of Trinidad and Tobago in treating with every individual who may find him or herself answerable to you. There's no protected person in this government. And we will tolerate no person, especially, and I'm speaking here now as political leader of the PNM, especially anybody who want to play the fool with public money and tell you there's PNM and who they vote for. Because one phone number they can't call is mine, if they get in trouble doing that. Because what I expect of the PNM is a higher standard and a commitment to do right to the people of Trinidad and Tobago. No person is authorized to use the PNM as any shield to conduct unacceptable behavior. A lot of money making takes place in the state enterprise sector. People do work, they earn money. But to get the opportunity to do work, you have to be selected for the job, the procurement process. We have just passed in the Parliament new procurement legislation. And very soon the regulations will be complete and it will be proclaimed, and the procurement process will be governed by an act of Parliament, and the actions will become actions understandable, governable, and prosecutable under law. And you must be very mindful of that, because some things that might have happened before as a normal way of doing things, and that's how we used to do it, may very well become breaches of a law. And I don't want those who are specialists in the courthouse to determine our future by using your inadvertent, well-meaning actions to foster any development in their own careers. Some of the people who might want to question your actions are the most unprincipled people that this country has ever produced, waiting there to call your conduct into question, even as they're doing so, their very own conduct is to be called into question. As soon as the regulations are available, the AG's office will have a briefing session with you, Chairman, to ensure that you know exactly what is expected of you, and you can pass that down through your board, or maybe we hope to have a meeting with boards, full boards, if you can find a big enough venue, so that people can understand what the law requires. And when that is done, we all now set out in a new era of procurement, where competition for government services is what's going to give us some element of guarantee that we're getting the best prices. But again, we don't want to get too bogged down in trying to dot every T and cross every I, dot every I and cross every T, and then get nothing done. Decision making ought to be what it should be: effective and timely decision making. And what advice do I give my staff? I give my staff the advice all the years I've been in public service, that you need to make decisions and stand ready to stand by the decisions you've made. And how you do that? You do it by saying, if I do this and I'm asked to explain it, especially in a quiet air-conditioned room, I can explain what I have done and be confident that my actions can stand the acceptance and the scrutiny of my peers and the country at large. That's the only yardstick. And if in doubt, get advice, or just don't do it at all until you get the doubt out of the way. But you need to move fast. Otherwise, 5 years will pass and the government will do nothing. Don't take it from me here to go out and try to be so perfect that you get nothing done. This week I was told by an officer in one of the state agencies that they've done one memo for 3 weeks. 12 versions of the same memo, trying to get something done, a minor matter. Because that is how some people try to prevent something from being done. I'm speaking here again as the political head of the executive. If there's anybody in your agency who you have fairly and satisfactorily come to the conclusion that that person is deliberately obstructing the progress of the government with respect to the carrying out of the work of the agency, do not hesitate to get rid of them. I have told the country on a political platform from where I come that we hold no desire to persecute anybody. But if there are persons in the agencies who got there by virtue of bad processes, and you discover it, then they can be removed. And if there are persons who are unqualified for the position that they're in, and they're stupid enough to identify themselves to you, and they're trying to obstruct the work you're trying to do, then get rid of them. There's a place for remedy for all of those kinds of persons. What we will not tolerate is persons who assume that they're there to carry out the work of those who are not there. And therefore, there should be no excuse of you telling me that you can't do this or you can't do that because so-and-so doing that. Even in the Prime Minister's office, I've experienced that. So I'm sure that somewhere in your area there are people out there who have that kind of attitude. And of course, there are persons in Trinidad and Tobago in 2016 who are prepared to tell you that the reason why they were dismissed is because of their race. Let me tell you what the government's position is on that. I don't know that there's any person in this country who has no claim on any race. We all have a race of one kind or another. So anybody who is telling you that they've been dismissed or they've been dealt with in a particular way because of their race in Trinidad and Tobago in 2016 is a person who doesn't have a proper argument to defend themselves. Because had they got a proper argument to defend themselves, they wouldn't have resorted to that. But what they're also saying to you, that because of my race, whatever that race might be, or my political affiliation, I could do what I want. And nobody could do anything about it because of my political affiliation, or my race, or worse, who I know. Such persons are in fact skating on ripe fig skins in my government. Because we subscribe to the principles of the national anthem, where every creed and race finds an equal place, but your race doesn't give you the opportunity or a pass to play the fool with public business. And you, Chairman, you are the ones who will have to guide your agencies away from these things. We also have, in the money-making side, the professional class, mainly lawyers. And I speak here as a person who knows I live with two of them. So if you hear me saying things that are not complimentary to lawyers, don't go by me and say that. But the legal profession has become a growth area in a recession in the government. What has happened in the last few years with legal fees is scandalous. And the expectation of the legal profession to do work in the state enterprise sector and elsewhere and be paid humongous amounts of money, that has to stop. $1.4 billion in legal fees in 5 years is a scandal. A 3-year experienced law student out of law school, 3 years. What kind of legal support could such a person give to earn $10 million in a period? What kind of brief? And what kind of brief you could get from a lawyer on one page that's worth, Mr. Peterson, I ain't talking about you, what kind of advice you can get on one page that warrants a bill of $280,000? Would you pay a bill like that to any lawyer of yours? So I'm asking you to be the guardians of the public purse, especially if you accept that the permanent secretary level is not there to filter down that guardianship. You have to take on some role that the weak PS level is not taking on, because somebody is counting on you. Or if you open the gate, all fall down. But again, remember, you are largely executing agencies. But if you do it in the way it ought to be done, it should not be so onerous. And we brought you onto this board not because we want to reward you for any particular action, but because we see you as citizens who are well qualified to discharge these duties on behalf of all of us in the country. So if you have new ideas, don't be afraid of new ideas. In fact, in this period of challenge, this is a great time for new ideas, because a lot of the old ideas are in fact in themselves obsolete, or the situation has made them obsolete. So I would be impressed by a chairmanship that has new ideas to do things differently, as long as the benefit can be demonstrated. Taking the position of just marking time and doing things how it used to be done before, certainly in the current arrangement, is not what we expect. I'm not asking you to be reckless. I'm not asking you to be capricious. But new ideas are premium and must be made to impact on things. So Today, I want you to go back to your agencies specifically to look at your development program and your bill paying exercises and see how you can ensure that you make whatever money is available to you get into the system as quickly as possible by doing whatever projects you set out to do or by paying bills that you owe. If you have questions about your bills, you can pay a part of it and let the query be confined to the unpaid part. But don't hold up the whole bill because $10 seem to be out of whack. And don't go outside of the AG's position. You would have heard the Attorney General telling the country that he has been forcing down legal fees at the AG office and requesting and getting significant discounts for legal bills. And accountants too? Professional fees. We have been very generous with professional fees from the state's coffers. You are free to negotiate those bills downwards to get better payments for the state. Not for the state, because the state is an esoteric body. For the taxpayer. Because you know something? The government's role is so big in this economy that in many situations, the government is either the only game or the biggest game in town. And that is a very, very good bargaining position if you're acting for the government. If you tell the lawyer not paying that, you say, fine, go and find another candidate. Good paying candidates are out there, but there aren't as many as good as the government with so much business. The government needs to negotiate. And you negotiate through the proper procurement process and let competition do the talking for you.